For the sake of this interview, can you please state your name and address?
Bill Wildman, Eastham, Massachusetts.
Okay. My first question is, what was your profession before the war?
I was a florist and horticulturist, grower of plants and so on.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted by my friends and neighbors.
Okay. What was a typical day like with your service?
My basic service was training in Fort Riley, Kansas for my basic training, which was an 8-week course. Then we went to military police school in Fort Gordon, Georgia for another 8 weeks and shipped directly to Berlin, Germany, where I was involved in securing the borders and seeing free transportation between the 4 parts of Berlin.
What was the biggest regret from the time you served?
I have no regrets. I think it was a great experience. I think every young man should spend 2 years in the service.
How was your training different from your service?
We went through a military police training in Fort Gordon, Georgia, which was typical civilian police. Then when we were shipped to Berlin, we went through another course of training, which was a situation of occupation police, where we had to work with the German population. In the rules of occupation, Berlin could not have any military, and we were the only military in control of the city.
Okay. What did you do in any downtime you had?
Socialize, mix with the people, mix with the public, party, normal working situation. We were in a situation where we worked 8 hours a day, all shifts. We were on 24 hours. We worked 8 hours a day, 3 shifts, 8 hours for the next 3 shifts of rotating shifts.
Okay. What was your most vivid memory of your service?
Seeing people escaping, leaving, and getting out of the East German socialist regimes. Seeing what freedom was, seeing what these people would do for freedom, including give their life.
What were the weather conditions like?
Conditions in Germany in Berlin were very similar to Cape Cod. Moderate, some freezing in the winter, very dry, no salt water around, no water around per se. It was a mild climate, comparatively.
Okay. Could you describe for us a typical meal in the military?
We ate very well. We were a small police outfit, and we had separate rations and separate, everything was separate for us. And our meals were exceptionally well. The financial situation there enabled the company to chip in. We had our own waitresses, our own cooks, our own service personnel that we employed to take care of our barracks and our clothing and our kitchen facilities. We lived very, very well until the wall went up.
Why did that change? Because the wall went up?
Well, when the wall went up, we didn't have enough personnel to do the job. For about 30 days, we worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without stopping. We were either on Checkpoint Charlie or on the wall patrol, controlling the Allies. There was just not enough personnel in Berlin to do the job. And when the wall went up, they shipped about 300 more military police from West Germany into Berlin, and it changed the whole situation that we were in.
Could you explain to us what Checkpoint Charlie was?
Well, Checkpoint Charlie, you have to understand the whole history of Berlin. After World War II, there was a Potsdam Agreement that divided Germany in two halves. Russian half was up to the Elbe River. The American half was the western part. The Americans wanted that part occupied and controlled by three allies: French, English, and American. Russian wanted to control the east side by themselves, so that when the distance between the Elbe River in Berlin is 110 miles, and Checkpoint Alpha was going into the East Germany's on the roadway into Berlin, where any Allied forces had to check in and travel the road and check out at Checkpoint Bravo, which was in Berlin. And the same with Checkpoint Charlie, was going into, after the wall, was going into East Germany and East Berlin, checking in and checking out. It was a way of making sure all allies going in and out were safe, went in and went out. Were not taken over by the East Germans, Russians, or opposing forces.
Okay. What was your job as a military police?
Primarily, it was seeing that the streets and the crossing point and the movement within the four sections of Berlin were kept free and moving. When the wall went up, that ceased, and then we were border patrol, seeing and helping people escape.
How is your life different now than before your service?
I saw what people would do for freedom. They'd give their life, they'd give anything to get out of the regimes of the East German Soviet bloc.
Could you describe for us your most frightening moment, if any?
Yeah, when we brought tanks up to any movement of any military had to be done by the military police. And we would escort tanks through the city to the points of conflict along the wall. And it was very hairy at the time, because we'd bring in 40-ton tanks, 6 or 8 tanks right up to the wall where there was a problem. And it got pretty hairy, not knowing what was going to happen.
What kind of problems were there?
People trying to get from east side of the wall, the Russian side, East German, into freedom. If they could get into Berlin, then they could fly out of Berlin into West Germany. But to get across that border, this is what the wall was put up for. Not to keep people out, but to keep people in from escaping. Just prior to the wall going up, they were coming over by the hundreds of thousands just to get out of the regime of the East Germans and get into freedom. And they were coming across every way, every day, by the thousand. And when the wall went up, there was was no way for them to get across. They were blocked totally.
Did you help put the wall up?
No, of course not. We would have helped take it down. I watched it go up. I did not help put it up. We patrolled it when it went up. And originally when it went up, it was only barbed wire. And this is where some of the famed pictures of East German policemen and East German Volkspolizei, which is the army, jumping over the walls and throwing their guns back to the west, to the east. I mean, they were coming across any way they could. Swimming, digging tunnels, every way they could come across.
How often do you think about the people you met in your time of service?
Often. I met people that escaped. I've met people. I eventually married a girl from Berlin, although I met her after I was discharged in the States. But we are still in contact with her family in Berlin, have been there several times, and are very close to many people that lived through this war situation.
Who or what was constantly on your mind while you were serving?
Say that again?
Who or what was constantly on your mind while you were serving?
I guess you become in a situation that you're not scared, but you see what's happening and wondering why it's happening. Why are people trying to get out of Germany or East Germany? What is their reason? What's going on? The harassment. And this was all during the Cold War, which was in 59, 58 through 60, and just prior to Vietnam starting. Our biggest concern, I think, was not being released from Berlin and being shipped to Vietnam. We were just prior to Vietnam breaking out.
Earlier you had said that you went through training. What was the training like?
Well, the basic infantry training is just a breakdown of your ideas of being a civilian to be in the military. It's a mental thing you go through going into any of the services to change you from a civilian to a military. That was done in Fort Riley, Kansas as basic training. Included firing weapons, basic camping outside, hiking, and so on. The secondary, which was your MOS, military police school, was more schooling and physical training for controlling forces and controlling mobs and controlling people, and civilian police of investigation and all this other type of thing. And then the training in Berlin for the specific rules of occupation left us in a situation where our duties were worked with one German policeman, or one West German policeman, and one American police. And we patrolled the city being occupying forces.
Okay. How has your service affected your life?
The service affects anybody that matures them. It lets them see the world in a different light. All is not good all over the world. There are people that want more power and more given to them. I can't exactly say it. It's changed my life politically, my thoughts politically as far as socialism and liberalism and working for what you have to get. I mean, if you want something, you can get it. If you don't want it, you can lay back and hope somebody will give it to you.
Okay. How often do you think of your time?
Now, not often. It was 50 or 60 years ago. A long time's gone under the wind.
Um, what was your happiest moment while you were serving?
That's kind of hard to tell. We had a lot of good times. But I guess the best time was when we left and got out of there and got home.
What were your thoughts when you got drafted?
I thought it was a commitment that most Americans needed to do, should do, and should be committed to do to help protect their country and support their freedoms. I did not regret being drafted. I didn't want to, but I think it's a commitment that everybody has to protect and help protect their country and their freedoms.
How close were you to the others in your unit?
Very close. It was a very small unit. We worked together very close. Very close together.
Could you describe for us the first image that comes to your mind when I say the Berlin Wall?
People escaping, different modes of getting out of East Berlin. Some of them I presume are still classified, I don't know. But the sights I saw and the way people did it was unbelievable what people would do for freedom.
What were the positive aspects of your service?
Probably the maturing from a young man, a young boy, to a man with a future.
Could you explain for us the purpose of being in Berlin?
The purpose, I think I explained, was the division of the country and the division of Berlin and maintaining it as a free section of the world. I said, I think I explained that earlier.
Okay. Were you around when the wall was going up?
I was there prior to the wall going up and while they built the wall.
Okay.
Incidentally, I was also there when they take the wall down as a tourist or as a visitor. They physically built that wall or the barricades in one night. It was that quick. After the first initial night, they started to build stone walls up. And if I could find someone to give her a piece of the wall, but I don't know where there is any. I have several pieces of the wall. I will look for them and see if I can find some.
Could you tell us the reactions of the people in Berlin when the wall was going up?
The people in West Berlin were dumbfounded. They didn't know what was going on. The people of East Berlin understood that the regime and the political situation in Berlin, there was no future for them, especially the young. They were so held down by socialistic governments, and they just couldn't understand what was happening. They had to get out of it, and they were coming, as I say, coming across in the droves in any way they could.
Um, you said you'd been to the wall when it was getting torn down.
I was there as a visitor when the wall was taken down.
Have you taken more of these trips to the?
Oh yes, we go over several times. As I say, my family, my wife's family, is still there, and cousins and so on. We visit.
What does it feel like to be back in Berlin?
It is such a sight to see. When the Allies took over West Berlin, they sunk much money into it and rebuilt the city as a modern, full city. The East Germans, Russians, did absolutely nothing. And the two sides of the city, when the wall went up, was like a black and white city and a prosperous city. When we went back and the wall was destroyed, the east side is being rebuilt like I have never seen. You couldn't look in a direction without seeing construction of new buildings, reconstruction of the old buildings, rebuilding of the whole city. Totally new city being built, which is now the capital, back being the capital of all Germany. It's a fantastic city, modern as can be.
If you could go back in time, is there anything you would have done differently?
Nothing that we could have done differently.
How do you feel towards Russia occupying East Berlin and then today?
Russia, I would not trust, no matter what they did. My wife's father was a prisoner of war with the Russians until 1952 or 53. There's no way of believing their political system. Even to this day, there is no control of freedom that the people have. Yes, they have more freedoms than they ever did have, and the Russian regime or the USSR has been broken down to a controllable, and other countries have come back in to their own power. But as far as the Russian regime, even at the present, I have no trust for them.
Could you explain for us any experiences that you think of today?
Nothing, only that the people, what conditions the people lived in under the communist regime and the socialist regime. It's happening now in China, in North Korea, and several of the countries of the Middle East. The same thing is happening. The power controls the people to such great extent that they have no way of getting you ahead of anything. There's the upper class, and there's no other way for anybody else to get up there. I mean, they are totally controlled societies. And I can't understand what's happening. I really can't.
You had said something about 287th Military Police Company.
Yeah,
Could
you can Google that, and it'll give you a lot of the pictures of what was going on. The 287th MP Company was a separate company, not attached to the Berlin Brigade. For some reason, it was the last horse platoon which was there to control masses and crowds of people. But it was a small company of 90 men that controlled the city of Berlin. Truly. The infantry that was there had no rights. The MPs were the controlling forces of the city. We had to work with the civilian police, civilian population directly.
You had shown a picture of you escorting a Russian.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing if you could get your German class to translate it. During the situations of the four powers in Berlin, the East German commandant had to come over to the west side where the officers were. And when they did, they had to be protected, more or less, from the masses because of the situation. And this was a picture that was in the daily special newspaper, one of the big newspapers in Berlin, on the front page, of us protecting or standing over the commandant of the East Russian German police, who was over into the West on business. It would be interesting to read it. I haven't read it in several years, but the German class might be able to translate it.
Are you still in contact with anyone from your unit?
Not directly, no.
What rank did you get to?
In the military police, there was no rank. PFC, period. You made no ranks at all.
Could you explain to us how it was different when you were coming home from your service?
There really wasn't any difference. I mean, we hadn't technically been in war like Vietnam or the Second World War. We were strictly a police action, and it was not a big problem coming back into this societies.
What were the weather conditions like? Did I already ask that?
Yes, similar. Yeah, you did have that.
Well, could you explain for us what the difference in the societies were from the east side to the west side?
Well, the east side was totally a government-controlled population. They were told when to work, when to... Everything was controlled by the government. It was a strictly socialistic, communistic type of government. There was no future. There was no future for the young people. They were all worked for the government, and the government told them what to do. The west side was totally free, totally opposite, where there were colleges, there were Free University of Berlin, the students were active and learning, had futures. It They're totally two different societies.
Thank you for your time today.
Okay.
That's all the time we have.
You got a half an hour?
Yeah.
Good.
And thank you for your service.
Good.